Well, hello folks, this is Fat Guy Flies RC coming to you from the man cave. This is the radio rates and CG video for the F9F-5 Panther from FREEWING 70mm, all new. Alrighty, now you already watched the unboxing and the assembly video. The only thing I did off camera was I installed a Gen 2 KM models afterburner, their version 2. And that only has just the yellow flame. Okay, we'll talk about that in just a moment. But if you look, the plane is got the models, it's live. And as you can see, she pretty well balances perfectly. I'm directly on the CG marks, which are 55 millimeters back from the leading edge of the wing. And they're actually marked on the back of the wing. And even when I put the gear down, she's still pretty good. So, all right. Remember, this is not a delta wing per se. Okay. Now, if she like suddenly dropping forward or suddenly dropping tail heavy, then I would know that my CG is not right. But right there is just about perfect. Okay. Now, to show that to you underneath the model, if you look, you can actually see right there, the other side? See right there? Those CG marks? It's actually written CG on there. Actually, the word, or the letters CG are actually, and you can feel them. Okay, so you're at the field, you can put your fingers right on those CG, if I can find them. Yeah, they're right there. You put your fingers right on that. And she pretty well sits right there. You know, she doesn't obviously drop to the tail or obviously drop to the, like you have to hold it up one way or the other, but she pretty well bounces right there, then you're okay. She's pretty good right there. All right. You're thinking, well, that's fine and dandy. That's where it is. How does that equate to putting your battery in? Well, got a 4000 in there. Okay, so if you look inside, you got this battery tray, all right? The 4000 is tucked in maybe about a 1/4 inch, maybe a 1/2 inch in. And if you see, I put some black marks there. You can see it from that point on. So I found CG, got her balanced, and took a magic marker. And this is as a new pilot, that's what you'd want to do, is you'd want to find the CG, move your battery backwards and forwards until you get her where she CG's nice on that spot, and then take a marker and then mark where that is. Now, that gives you the baseline. You can run from a 3700 up to a 5000 in this. So the general rule of thumb is the bigger the battery, the further back. Okay, so if I put a 3700, that would mean that I would actually go forward just a touch, okay, and put it in there, and then I would put my hatch back on, okay, and I'd feel that CG underneath there. And if she's still pretty darn level, either with the gear up or down, preferably with the gear up because that's how you're flying, okay, if she's right there, then I leave it alone, okay. Then if she's nose heavy, then I'll move. Oh, there's a nose starting to drip down this way. Then I'll move the battery back just a little bit until I get it right where I want it. Okay. Now, a 5000, you saw me where I put the 4000 in. A 5000, I'm going to put that in maybe 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch a little further back, larger battery, and I'll check my CG. And then that's why I use my 4000, my baseline, and then I don't have to put any other marks in there because I know for a bigger battery, I'm going a little further back. For a lighter battery, I'm going a little farther forward. And that's the general rule of thumb. Now, there are some planes, like the F4 Phantom, like this one right here. You have one place you put a battery. I don't care how big it is. That's where the plane wants it. So, there's no movement on the battery. But every plane is different. But for the general rule of thumb, the larger the battery, the further back. The lighter the battery, the further forward. Okay. Now, that covers CG. Now, the book says that the rates on this plane, and rates means how far the control surfaces, ailerons, elevator, rudder, flaps. Rates are how far they move. Now, on a spectrum receiver or transmitter, we go with percentages, all right? And the manual, they're very spectrum friendly. The manual gives you a percentage on how far, on what your rates are. Now, they only give you a high and a low, okay? But I like picking a mid rate. So I have a, now, side note, if this should not be your first plane, okay? If you're flying, if you bought this jet, then that means you've got a couple of high wings under your belt, you've got a couple of low wings under your belt, and you got at least one or two warbirds or fast-moving low wings under your belt, and preferably you've got a 64mm EDF under your belt, like say an Arrows Marlin or I don't know, something else at 64, a smaller Marlin or a smaller EDF. This would be a great beginner 70mm, okay? And then from there you go to your 80mm and then your 90mm, and then you buy your own jet that you fly around in. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. All right, so back to this. Rates has to do with how far the ailerons and your control surface are going to travel. Now, in the transmitter, what they have picked for what they said on aileron, elevator, and rudder, they said your high rate needs to be 100, okay? So, and they even give you a suggested exponential. Exponential refers to how quickly that control surface reaches its furthest arc. In other words, if that's 100% throws, in other words, how far it travels, that's what means. When someone says throws, that means, or deflection, that means how far that control surface moves. So let's just say that's 100%, okay? Now, the expo, you hear that term expo a lot. What that means is how quickly that control surface gets to that farther arc. And the way the expo plays into that is at the beginning, if you have a lot of expo, like say 50% of expo, then it's going to kind of go slowly for that first part, and then it gets to a certain point, in other words, the 50% point, and then it lets go, and then you have the normal rate of travel. Okay, if that makes any sense. Think of it as dragging your feet in sand, and you're pushing your foot through the sand, and you know that as soon as your foot frees itself from the sand, it's going to go faster, right? Well, think of that amount of movement in the sand as your expo. So if you put your toe in and it immediately comes out and only 10%, well, only 10% expo, it goes really quickly. But for that little 10%, it moves slower. If you had 30%, well, then your toe's a little further down, and it's going to take a 30% more travel in the sand, slower travel, and then it's going to free itself and go faster. So that's the way I like to explain expo. Think of it as dragging your feet in the sand, and whenever your foot clears the sand, that's when that percentage of expo is over, and now you have the normal rate of travel. Okay, look really close at the rudder. Okay, back here, or sometimes called the vertical stabilizer. Okay, I have on my rudder, I have 100% travel. Okay, but I have 50% expo because when I'm driving down the runway, I don't want it to be all over the place. I don't want it to be twitchy. I don't want it to move quickly. So as I barely touch the rudder, okay, the first 50% of my stick movement is like labored or in the sand, right? And then suddenly it goes faster. You kind of watch it. See how it gets faster towards the end? All right. So that kind of gives you a graphical display of expo in the works. Now, the rates that are picked, they say for aileron, rudder, and elevator, for high rates, or your highest setting, is 100%. Well, that's what 100% looks like. Okay? That's what 100% looks like. For mid rates,
okay, 90.
I pick 90 because the low rate is 80, so I like to pick a mid. So there's my mid, okay? All right. And then my low is 80, Okay, so there's 80. And just so you know, on my rudder, I left it at 100% movement, 100% travel, with 50% expo. So I don't have that adjustable. I've only got my ailerons and my elevators as changing rates. So again, low is 80, mid is 90, and high is 100. More than likely, I will be flying in my high rates over 100% throws, 30% expo. Seems to be my default on everything I fly. All right, now, so we've talked about the rates on the normal flying control surface. We've talked about CG. Let's talk about flaps. Now, the book says they don't give you a percentage like I wish they did, but instead they give you two positions. In other words, your takeoff position,
takeoff flaps,
okay,
landing
and
flaps.
then your landing position, your landing flaps, okay. And what they give you for the high rate, which would be the furthest that this is extended, they give you 30 millimeters. Now, I'm going to show you how to figure that out using a travel gauge, okay? Put the plane on the plane stand, turn it upside down, okay? All right. See my flaps, right? There's the flaps. I'm putting them back normal position. Okay. This is a throw meter or a throw gauge, okay? When you put it on the control surface, okay, you want that bottom little needle to be on 0, okay? Okay, now that's on 0. So, when I go into my flap settings, okay, and I'm adjusting my flaps, trying to pick how far down I want my landing flaps to go, well, it says that my rate needs to be, for my low rate or the takeoff flaps, needs to be 18 millimeters. So,
takeoff flaps.
All right, right down there, I'm a little bit over, but that says 20. Okay, so 18, 20, pretty close. Now it says for landing flaps, it says 30 millimeters.
Landing flaps.
Okay, and I'm at like 32. So I'm a little over. So if I wanted to change that, okay, looky there on my takeoff flaps. Go back to takeoff flaps. So I know negative 45 is at 20 millimeters. Well, we want 18. So let's knock that down. Let's take it to, actually go the other way. Instead of 45, let's take it to 52 and see what that does.
Flaps are up. Takeoff flaps.
All right, let's see where that puts it at. Puts it about 19. So I'm going the right direction. So we'll just keep going. Make it negative 55. Okay, negative 55. And let's see. Booyah, that puts it right on 18. 18 millimeters. Okay, so takeoff flaps, 18 millimeters. And then on your spectrum then, for the spectrum for takeoff is going to be a negative 55. Now, I saw nothing in the instructions about an elevator to flap mix, so I'm going to assume there isn't any. All right, now I'm going to do landing flaps.
Landing flaps.
Okay, let's make sure we're at 0.
Flaps.
And we are.
Landing flaps. Okay,
landing flaps for the high rate, or there's the furthest extension, should be 30 millimeters. Okay, I'm way over. I'm at like 33. Okay, so position 2. Well, it shows negative 8. So let's take it. Let's lessen that a little bit. See, it says negative 8. Make that negative 14 and see what that does. All right, that takes it down to 32. Take it negative 20. All right. Make it negative 28. I think we're going to be on the money. Or negative 22. Booyah. Makes it right on 30. So let's go all the way to 0.
Flaps are up.
That's at 0.
Take off flaps.
That's at 18.
Landing flaps.
And that's at 30. Well, that actually went, let's make it to negative 22. That kind of went over. So we'll make that negative 20 instead. Negative 20.
Take off flap. Flaps
all right.
are up.
0.
Take off flaps.
18.
Landing flaps.
And 30. All right.
Flaps are up.
So that tells me then that my flap settings for flaps up, okay, for flaps up are going to be a negative 100. For takeoff flaps are going to be a negative 55 on a Spectrum transmitter.
Landing flaps.
And then for landing flaps are going to be a negative 20. So negative 100, negative 55.
Takeoff flaps. Flaps are up.
Okay. And then negative 20. All right. And that is your flap settings that correlate with the percentages versus the millimeters in the book. Okay. Again, flap settings for Spectrum. Flaps up, negative 100. Takeoff flaps, negative 55. Landing flaps, negative 20.
Landing flaps. Flaps are up.
Okay, so that takes care of that. Now, let's talk about the radio. Okay, I have installed a 7-channel Lemon RX Gen 2. Okay, let me show you my setup. When you're installing a radio, okay, almost 100% of all radios or receivers, I'm sorry, the signal wire, in other words, we talked about signal in the build, the light colored wire, the white, the yellow, are going to be on towards the top of the receiver. So and everything's labeled. You got throttle, you got aileron, you got elevator, rudder, okay, aux 1, which would be gear, and then aux 1, which would be flap, and then you got, and for this one, you have an aux 7, okay? So everything you install, the light wire or the white wire is going to be towards the top of the receiver. In other words, I look in there, I see all, I don't know if you can see it or not. See all them yellow wires there? All that yellow in there? So if I put these upside down, you see a black wire, you see a black, but that's all light colored, okay? You want to put your receiver somewhere as close to the middle of the plane now as you can get. Now, you can't always do it with some jets or stuff. You got to put it right all the way up front. But if you have the ability and it doesn't interfere with your battery, put your receiver somewhere towards the middle of the plane if you can. I have ran what you call a satellite, which is, if you see this wire, see that braided wire that's going down the side there along that, you can kind of see it. It's kind of like a wrapped wire. There's a satellite going down here. That just gives me extra range. The antenna's on my receiver. I have one going down, actually in the exhaust, and then one going this way, making those two antennas 90 degrees from each other. Same thing with the satellite. I've got one going down and one going this way, making it 90 degrees from each other. So I'm not going to have any problem with signal. Okay? So mount your receiver somewhere where you can get at it, if at all possible. Especially if it's one that's a gyroed receiver, because you want to make sure that your control surfaces are going the right direction. Okay? And with a Lemon RX, if they're not going the right direction, there's this. I'll put a link to their manual for this, which is very easy to follow. But follow those steps in case your control surface is going the wrong direction with the gyro. Now, if it's just going, like if you pull up elevator and it goes down, change that in your transmitter. Okay, but as far as the direction of the gyro, which way the gyro corrects, if it's not correcting the right way, you change that on top of the transmitter, on top of the receiver. That's why you want to be able to get to where you can access the receiver. Okay? Now, let's talk about reverse thrust. Remember I said I had aux 7 or I had aux 2. That's the little yellow pigtail wire that's coming off of your throttle cable. I have plugged that into aux 7, which on the Lemon RX is actually right next to the throttle. Okay, because you got throttle, you got aileron, you got elevator, you got rudder, you got gear, and then you got flap for aux 1. And then they come back over here right next to the throttle, and they have your aux 2. And that's where I plugged that little yellow wire. And of course, that little yellow wire is single. It's going to be at the top side of the receiver. Okay? Now, what I did was, going to my back here, okay, you're going to go to your model setup. You're going to channel aside. Okay? Now, if you look, aux 2, or it's channel 7, or aux 2, okay, because we know aux 1 is flaps. We know gear is channel 5. Channel 6 is aux 1. Channel 7 is aux 2. I picked I. Okay? What you do, just click on that, and then click the switch you want, and it automatically records what switch you just picked. Well, I want I. Okay? Now, in this transmitter, okay, I'm sorry, in that receiver, that 7-channel receiver, that Lemon RX, they have like a shadow channel, which is actually auxiliary 3. So if you have a transmitter that supports 8 channels, 9 channels, or more, then it will automatically pick your aux 3, and then that's where you can put your adjustable gains. And what adjustable gains means, and I always pick the knob. I always pick the knob. And the reason for that is I want my gains adjustable. Go back to have my signal again. All right. The reason I want my gains adjustable is because, and gains means how far the gyro corrects against the wind. Okay? If you're flying along and your plane, the wind is just rocking this plane around, all right, and you got the gyro on, but boy, the wind is just really wreaking havoc with it, you'll want to turn the gains up. In other words, that's why I put them on a knob. I'll turn them up a little bit, okay? And then that should even out the flight a little bit better. You're taking a light foam plane, and the gyro makes that plane fly just a little bit better. Has nothing to do with the skill of you as a pilot. It just makes a light foam object fly better in the wind. So don't let these people, you know, some of the old timers say, you're using gyro, you're cheating. No. Okay. Now, if it was self-leveling all the time, that's all you ever did, well, yeah, you're kind of getting away from that. Okay, because you're never really going to grow if you self-level all the time. That's a different discussion. But the gyro, the wind gyro, strictly just wind mitigation, just makes the plane fly a little bit better. Now, if you're flying along really fast and she starts to oscillate, in other words, doing this number here, what is happening there is your gyro is correcting too much. Okay, it's overcorrecting. And what happens then when it overcorrects, it kicks it up, pushes it down, kicks it down, pushes it down. In other words, it's correcting too quickly, and you're starting to oscillate. That happens when you've got too much speed. And if that happens, then I turn the gains back down a little bit. Okay, you're trying to find that sweet spot to where the plane is flying nice and straight and level, or nice and good in the wind, you know, and but at the same time not oscillating. And see, that changes every day. That's why I like having it adjustable on a knob, because if it's really, really windy that day, I'm not going to be flying super fast all the time anyways. So I'm going to have my gains up a little bit. Okay. But if there's like a dead calm, okay, I don't need much. I don't need much autocorrection. I mean, I don't need much gyro help from a gyro. So, because I want to really, you know, go fast. All right. So therefore, if I start oscillating, then I know I need to turn them gains down. So every day you're going to be moving that roller up or down based upon the conditions of how things are that day. I have found that in the mornings the air is thicker. Okay, that may not make sense, but it really is real. The air is thicker. It's got more moisture in it. Okay, so the plane is going to react a little bit differently than it will, say, in the afternoon when the air is very dry. Okay, so that's why I like to make adjustments. And those are just small adjustments that you'll learn how to do in time. All right, now let's talk about gyro correction direction. In other words, we want to make sure that that gyro is correcting in the correct direction. All right, because if this aileron is correcting incorrectly, in other words, it's not going the right way it's supposed to go for the gyro to work, then I am going to have a hard time. I'm going to suddenly have a pile of foam that's going to dart right in the ground. Okay, you're going to have a very bad crashed plane and a very bad day. So it's essential that if you're going to use a gyro, make sure that gyro is going in the correct direction. Okay, and the way you check your direction is turn your gains all the way up. That way the correction is going to be, you're doing this on the ground, is the most distinct. Okay, so what I want to do is if I pull up on this wing, in other words, the wind is hitting the bottom of my wing, I want that wing to push down back into the wind. So therefore that aileron would come up. So, if you can't really see it, put your hand on the control surface. It should push against the movement. So if I move this wing up, then it should push against my hand, and it does. So what do you think would happen with the elevator? If I push up, that elevator should go in the direction of the movement. It should push against the movement. So I feel it kicking up as I bring the plane up. All right. So obviously with a rudder, if I'm going to pull the rudder this way, the rudder should push against my hand, and it does. All right. So that way I know my gyro is going the correct direction. It's going to counteract against the outside force correctly. All right, because if it did just the opposite, it would go the wrong way. It would overcorrect. I would try to recover with my controls, and that's just going to exacerbate. I can't say that word. The problem is going to make it that much worse, and suddenly you've got this, $300 ball going right to the ground. Okay, so gyros are great, but you need to have the ability to understand that they've got to be going in the right direction before you take off, and that's a simple way. Simple way. Make sure they're all the way up, and if they go against your hand, against the direction, then you know they're going the right way. Okay? Now, let's talk about thrust reverse. That little yellow pigtail I was talking about earlier that I'll put into aux2 or channel 7. Okay? I already told you that I assigned it to the I switch. Now, I like it on, this is what you call a momentary switch. In other words, you have to hold it down for this switch to go to its second position.
Braking.
In other words, I got to hold it down to brake. So if I hold that down, turn my motor on, and I give it throttle, look at that, it's getting pushed towards me. I feel the air. Now, as soon as I take my finger off the button,
Brakes off.
now, see, it goes forward. Hold it down,
Braking.
braking, take my finger off the switch,
Brakes off.
now it's going to go forward.
Brakes off.
Okay. All right. That does not hurt the motor of the ESC at all, because what it does, it's just telling, okay, go the opposite direction. It's an electric motor. It goes this way, goes this way, goes this way, goes that way. It's not going to hurt it, okay? And besides that, it also pauses for half a second before it goes the other direction. It's not like a geared or a chain or anything. It's just an electrical magnet. Magnet doesn't care if it goes this way or if it goes that way. All right? So don't let that bother you, that, hey, you're suddenly stopping it. No, don't worry about that. It doesn't hurt it at all, okay? Now, if you do it in flight, you're not going to hurt the motor. However, those blades, they're used to pushing air this way, and now you're wanting to stop with air flowing in and push the blade the other. Now that's going to make them blades flex a little bit. So for that reason, I don't recommend doing it in flight, because you're just making it very hard on the individual blades of the fan of your motor. Same thing if you had a prop plane. I don't recommend doing that in the air, because number one, suddenly your plane wants to go backwards. Planes don't fly backwards that well that I know of, and it's hard on the prop. So don't. I mean, it may be up high, look how cool to shoot it around or something, but it's hard. You do it too often, It's going to be hard on the motor or hard on the prop itself. Okay? All right. So we've talked about reverse thrust, how to assign it, put on a switch. That's just the best way, because when you release that, it's automatically going to go forward, okay, which is the way you want to travel anyways. We've talked about the importance of making sure your gyro direction is correct for obvious reasons, because if it'll auto-correct, and then you'll try to correct, and the next thing you know, you got a crashed plane, okay? We've talked about the CG. We've talked about what rates are in the book. We've talked about how to convert using which I'll put a link to this in I'm going to say this thing is like 18 bucks. I got it on Amazon. I'll put the link to this in the video. Just a great way to figure out your thing. Now, if you want to do the rudder, you put the plane on its side and then clamp it on the side. That way it pendles back and forth. It works the same principle though. Okay. Talked about rates. We talked about CG. We've talked about radio rate. We talked about the radio setup. Talked about where you put your battery. Oh yeah, the afterburner. That is a KM Models Gen 2, their second edition, and all it is on the back of these FREEWING models now, they have two little bolts. That way you don't have to take your motor and everything all the way out. You just pull it out a little bit, take the cover off. Okay, is all you do. Is you're going to take the cover off. Okay, there's two bolts on either side of the motor that hold it in. Pull the motor out, and on the back of the motor, you're going to see two little bolts. All right, get yourself two small machine screws that will hold that afterburner on. Crank it down. Run the wire that comes through it up front. Okay, make sure that wire that you've got. Make sure there'll be some zip ties. Make sure you tie them off with your ESC lead. That way that wire stays there and doesn't get sucked into the fan. I've done that. Lost an afterburner that way. And then bring it through here, and that's that yellow and black wire, that bundle of wires. That's what that is right there. That doesn't come with this model. That's my wires. And I've got them zip tied here so they don't slide back either and work their way back into the fan and cut my ESC or cut my afterburner out. Okay. Now, we talked about CG. Now let's talk about the last thing we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about throttle ESC calibration. Okay. Now, the way you do this, make sure your throttle cut is off. In other words, motor works. Okay. I'm going to unplug the motor. I'm going to go to full throttle. I'm going to plug it back in, and I'm listening for 2 distinct beeps. When I hear those distinct beeps, I'm going to pull the throttle back all the way down to 0 throttle. All right. There's those 2 beeps. All right, now that was a very quiet. I wish this ESC was louder, but when I had the full throttle, I plugged it in. I heard 2 beep beep, and then I pulled my throttle all the way down, and then I heard it go beep. I heard the ESC arm, and then I heard the cell count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 because I've got a 6 cell battery in there. Now, the reason I did that is it is now calibrated. So as soon as I put just the slightest little bit of throttle in, see, I'm getting some response. Now, had it not been calibrated, I could probably move this. I'm going to turn this off. I could have probably moved that much. See how much? Watch this. I could have moved it that much and still not heard any throttle. But now, because it's calibrated, all right, you'll say, well, what does that mean? What that means is, by me putting it at full throttle, plugging it in, the ESC realizes, wait a minute, you started this thing with full throttle. Oh, you want us to go to programming mode. So the ESC automatically goes into programming mode. You hear the first 2 beeps, and then you pull it down. That told the ESC, all right, That all the way up was the top level of the throttle range. In other words, it's the highest throttle amount. So it recorded that, and that way it knows now that's full throttle. And then you pull it all the way down, okay, it beeped to arm the ESC, and it recorded the lowest throttle. In other words, so now it knows its full range of throttle. Because if you didn't, yeah, the plane would still fly, but however that much that we were able to move, you'll be robbing yourself of that much throttle response. In other words, you think it's full throttle, but actually you're only flying around 80% throttle, and you think it's full throttle. That's the importance of calibrating your ESC, because the plane needs to be at the full range of everything as far as throttle goes. Okay? All right. The only other thing that I'm going to be doing to this plane, I'll be giving it a clear coat of mid-wax polyacrylic. Let me show you the product real quick before you go anywhere. Okay, that's the product I'm going to use. Okay, I'll include a link to my video on how to do that. It's called the plane treatment. And all I'm doing is just I'm going to cover the fuselage because, or the windshield, because it'll make it white. It'll kind of make it opaque. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have a cloudy canopy. All right, but what it'll do, it'll get a nice clear coat. Yes, it's already shiny, but it's going to make it even more shiny. But what it does, like your nails, you grab the plane, little dents and dings, it helps prevent that. Puts a protective shell, a clear shell over your model. It doesn't add such a minuscule fraction of amount of weight. Not for the amount of protection you get, it's well worth this minuscule amount of weight that it adds. Okay. All right. I think that's pretty much it. I can't think of anything else that we have to cover. The model has plastic bits and pieces all over it. Like the bottom of these are plastic because you know you're going to probably come in, you might strike your wing. Well, they got plastic back there to protect that. Doesn't have any plastic back here. I wish it did, because sometimes a plane will rock back. But the nice thing about this plane is even taking the battery out of it, it'll still fit flat. It's not going to rock back on its wing. You got plastic here. These wing fences are plastic. Where else? I noticed some plastic on it just for protection. Well, I guess maybe that was it. Oh yeah, where the wings connect together, that's all plastic. That's all hard plastic there. I love these quick connect. Remember, make sure when you click in your wings that these pins have to be going. This one's going all the way forward, and this one's going all the way aft or backwards. Okay, same thing over here. If you don't have that, then your wing is not clicked in, and then you're going to be flying along, and your wing's going to go this way, and then you're going to think, well, there goes my $300 plane. Okay, EDF cover, that part is plastic. Oh, that does have plastic. That little tip there is plastic. So when you're going to take off and you lift off just a little too much and you strike your tail, you've got plastic there to protect that foam instead of eating it up. So that's good. Flaps. Doesn't have lights. It would be nice if it had lights, but then again, that would jack the price up even more. Not a whole lot, but it would be nice to have a landing light on the front and maybe some nav lights on either end. That would be nice, but you know, how's the saying going? You wish in one hand and poop in the other and see which one gets filled first. But there you go. That is the FREEWING F9F-5 Panther. And it's a legacy jet, same thing like the F-86 and the T-33. They're legacy jets. This is not a Delta flying plane. This is not a high alpha landing plane. This plane you land like a Viper. You bring her in straight, okay? You bring her in, you land her level, and then right before you touch down, you just give it the evermost little bit of nose up, just to let that front wheel clear, and then let her settle down. All right. Can't think of anything else to talk about. That's the F9F Cougar from FREEWING. It's their latest plane they've got out. And I'm liking these these highly detailed, well done 70 millimeters EDFs are coming out with. All right, folks. Thank you for watching. God bless each and every one of y'all. This is Fat Guy Flies RC saying God is good. And don't forget, face pounding friends and the Panthers. Rawr. Rawr. Sounds kind of corny, doesn't it?